Okay, so I have chapter 7, which is describe the sensory and perceptual properties of gustation, including the stimulus, apparatus, and pathway in the brain. So first, I'm going to talk about what is gustation. It is the sense of taste. It is related to eating, and it helps determine what we are putting into our mouths. For something to be tasted, it must dissolve in the saliva, and that will stimulate the taste receptors on the tongue. So taste and flavor are a little bit different than each other. Taste is a composite of gustation and olfaction. So olfaction is going to be your smell. Flavor of food really depends on its odor. That's why olfactory and gustation go hand in hand. So the 6 qualities of taste are bitterness, sourness, sweetness, saltiness, umami, and fat. So fat is also a rather new taste quality in the qualities of taste. So there's not a whole bunch of information on fat in the book so far. So the stimuli reacts with their receptors chemically in gustation, which usually we are used to learning about thermal, photic, or kinetic energy instead of chemical reactions. Taste gustation is the sensory detection of food on the tongue as well. Okay, so perception of gustatory information. So I'm going to start with salt. For something to taste salty, it must ionize. Sodium chloride is the best stimulus for saltiness receptors, but also salts containing metallic cations with small anions taste salty. The receptor for saltiness is a sodium channel. So it is so how it chemically reacts, it is present in the saliva. The sodium then enters taste cell and depolarizes it, triggers action potentials that causes the cell to release the neurotransmitter. Maybe. Okay, it's not working, sorry. So the perception of gustatory information continued. Now I'm going to move on to sour. Receptors appear to respond to hydrogen ions that are present in acidic solutions. Ions must have an effect as well. So the reason for the anion effect is unknown as well. So moving on to bitter, sweet, and umami. They are all linked to G proteins. Bitterness and sweetness receptors may be similar. And for sweetness, the stimulus is a sugar, which is glucose or fructose. And then the bitterness stimulus is quinine, and quinine is a plant alkaloid. So one receptor for umami is similar to the sweet receptors. And there's 30 different receptors for bitterness. Most compounds that are found in nature are poisonous to us, actually. Okay, so pathway in the brain. So gustatory information is transmitted through cranial nerves 7, 9, and 10. And so I'm going to go over kind of what happens with those cranial nerves. So the information from the interior part of the tongue travels through the chorda tympani, which is the 7th cranial nerve. And that is going to be a branch of the facial nerve that goes beneath the eardrum. The taste receptors in the posterior part send information through the tongue branch of the 9th cranial nerve. And then within the 10th cranial nerve, that carries the information from receptors of the palate and epiglottis. So the first station kind of taste is going to be the nucleus of solitary tract, which is located in the medulla. And then also for animals, taste-sensitive neurons send axons to the ventral posteromedial thalamic nucleus. This nucleus also receives somatosensory info as well. Okay, moving on, continued. The thalamic taste-sensitive neurons send axons to the primary gustatory cortex base of the cortex, which is the base of the frontal cortex and in the insular cortex. And then the last part of it is the neurons will project to the secondary gustatory cortex. Moving on to, let's see here. So that is the pathway in the brain. I kind of have a picture here talking about how the medulla and all the different parts of the tongue send those transmitters to the brain, and that's how it moves from the brain. Supplemental source. So I thought I would talk about, okay, so we're just going to read it from here. The supplemental source that I'm going to talk about is kind of how COVID-19 affects gustation and olfaction. So there was a study that was conducted on 417 patients that were diagnosed with COVID. More than half of them were females, 263 to be exact. And kind of what they figured out was 86.5 to 88% of patients reported olfactory and gustatory dysfunction from the sickness. So if you watch the news, you know that a lot of people are losing their sense of smell and taste when they get this virus. And they also found out that females were more affected from olfactory and gustatory dysfunction than males. So I thought that was super interesting. And then I have my references here in APA format. And then I think that is all.